Metroidvania is the genre that refuses to die. There's so many genres that I used to love as a kid, but over the years I've started to notice that they don't really get made anymore today. We don't really get a lot of run-and-gun games like Metal Slug anymore, and even though 3D platformers are starting to make a comeback, I don't really see a lot of collectathons anymore. A lot of genres I grew up with as a kid kind of fell into obscurity in one way or another, but the video game genre that has not only stood the test of time, but has been becoming increasingly popular in recent years is the Metroidvania. But why is that? What makes these games so special in an industry that has been rapidly moving away from this style in favor of more massive, content-filled games with focuses on narrative over gameplay? Do Metroidvanias just offer something that can't be found in modern AAA games? Also, what's the future for Metroidvanias? There's been a popular debate on whether or not franchises like Resident Evil, Batman Arkham, and even From Software's Souls series being the natural evolution of Metroidvanias. My first introduction to this type of game was probably the worst starting point for anyone trying to get into this genre. I'm not one of the OGs that played Super Metroid on the SNES or Symphony of the Night on PS1 when it released, but it still didn't stop me from eventually finding them. Believe it or not, my first game in this genre was Metroid Prime for the GameCube. The reason I say this is a bad starting point is because as a kid, all I knew was that Metroid Prime was this really unique first-person shooter where you explore an alien planet. I knew that I liked this game, but I couldn't find any other first-person shooter games like it at the time. What I did find, though, was that there was another Metroid game on the Game Boy Advance, so I eventually got my hands on Fusion. This is what opened my eyes, because even though Metroid Fusion was a 2D platformer, exploring the world in the same way gave me an understanding of why I liked Metroid Prime so much. Now, I know a lot of people will argue that Fusion isn't a true Metroid because of how linear it is, but this is about how I found the genre. Plus, I'm not really a purist like that. I eventually was recommended by a friend that if I liked Metroid, I should try this other game on GBA called Castlevania, Aria of Sorrow. After that, it was basically over. I became a huge Castlevania fan. I ended up buying all the Castlevania games for the Nintendo DS, and later on I played Symphony of the Night for the first time on my Xbox 360, which became one of my favorite games of all time. Ever since then, I've been addicted to this style of game, so much so that I'm more excited for Hollow Knight Silksong than I am for Grand Theft Auto 6. Metroidvanias offer some of the most memorable experiences in gaming. If they weren't so good, there wouldn't be 1,000 of them being made each month. I mean, look at Hollow Knight. There's literally channels dedicated to the lore of this game like you see with the Souls series. The very core of a Metroidvania is in its organic exploration and sense of discovery. Now, I won't lie, for newcomers to the genre, there are barriers to entry, no pun intended. One being that you can easily become lost and find yourself circling around the same environments over and over again. But when you stumble across a new area, it ends up feeling personal to you because you weren't guided there by an objective marker. You truly found it on your own. More recent Metroidvanias use a lot more subtle environment cues and lighting techniques to help kind of funnel you to specific areas. The main gameplay loop is exploring until you find a path that's inaccessible. Sometimes it can be a ledge that you can't quite reach or a crawl space too small to fit through. With nowhere else to go, you end up exploring all the branching paths that you passed along the way until you find some unique ability or utility item that will help you progress further. This gameplay loop repeats as the world expands and becomes more intricate. Also, the best Metroidvanias make you feel like you're completely breaking the game by the end. I absolutely love it in Metroid when I finally get the gravity suit and the screw attack. It just feels like combat is basically optional at this point as you seamlessly move through the world like some god. It's the ultimate power fantasy. So with the unique sense of discovery through organic exploration, its non-linear world design that's constantly evolving, and meaningful rewards that slowly build up your arsenal, giving you that feeling of total control, it's no wonder why Metroidvanias are still popular today, as they kind of tap into our basic human instincts. Our very nature is to solve problems, and gaining mastery over our environment is how we evolved as a species. Now, I don't know about you, but when it comes to modern gaming, I feel like I haven't had much that truly speaks to me. I just feel like a lot of games being made today aren't really as engaging as what we used to get in the past, at least in the AAA space. Now, there are outliers in the industry like From Software and Capcom, but it feels like the majority of games coming out just want to play it safe. It's always some sequel to a franchise that I no longer care about, or some massive open world. And on top of that, they just take way too long to develop now. I'm especially sick of playing games that feel more like movies, constantly taking control away from me to vomit out some exposition that I don't want to hear about. Whatever happened to shutting the hell up and showing me things through environmental storytelling? That's why I feel like Metroidvanias are that genre that has never failed me. They're no nonsense, straight gameplay without all that excessive dialogue, and they still manage to have depth to them because of their non-linear nature. And that's really why I play a lot of older games these days. These newer games seriously will slow down to a halt and have you hanging out and talking to NPCs and taking a rest from all the combat. And these stupid developers really think they're being artsy or something when they say, oh, it's just pacing. Like, no, I don't want to take a break from gameplay, and I don't want to watch your stupid movie that you've disguised as a video game. Now, earlier I mentioned how I wanted to talk about the future of Metroidvanias, specifically when it comes to AAA development. We've seen more and more AAA games use Metroidvania elements. The Tomb Raider reboot, Arkham Asylum, Jedi: The Fallen Order. Hell, the Resident Evil series has had Metroidvania elements all the way as far back as the PS1. But what's more interesting to me, and this is really the first time I ever noticed it, is when I played Dark Souls 1 for the first time. I remember saying to myself, this is a Castlevania game. Now, I know I'm probably going to see a lot of pushback in the comments by purists who say that it has to be gear-gated in order to be a Metroidvania and whatever else. But those of you who are open to it, I think Dark Souls is the natural evolution of the Metroidvania. I mean, just let me draw some parallels for you. Let's compare Dark Souls 1 with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So they both feature worlds inspired by Gothic architecture. They both have non-linear world design that interconnects with itself and branches out in multiple directions. They both have similar enemy design and boss fights that have you squaring off against monsters that dwarf you in size. They both have a focus around RPG progression. And I think this is a funny one, but I'll say it anyways. They both have you smacking random walls to reveal hidden rooms. I mean, is it just a coincidence? Or how about this one? They both have deliberate combat in which your weapon swings lock you in place for the duration of that attack's animation. They both have strategically placed checkpoints for you to rest at in between difficult areas. I could go on, but I feel like it would require me to dedicate an entire video to comparing the two. And with the recent revival of Metroid Dread and soon to be Prime 4, it feels like we might be headed towards a full-blown renaissance, if we weren't already in one. Even Castlevania, Konami has been making an effort to make sure all of their games are available, all the way from the NES, Super Nintendo, to the Game Boy Advance, even the Castlevania games on Nintendo DS with the Dominus collection. This is a huge win for games preservation. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were using Castlevania as kind of a test bed to gauge interest in the series, because what I think is that they're planning on rebooting Castlevania. I mean, we're already seeing this happen with the Metal Gear Solid games, and this is my tinfoil hat theory, but I think Konami would most likely revive Castlevania in the style of a Souls game. I feel like Castlevania and Dark Souls go together like peanut butter and jelly, and this would be absolutely huge, at least for me, because I was disappointed in the 3D Castlevania games because they kind of felt more like God of War clones. Whatever happens, I know one thing. It's a hell of a time to be a Metroidvania fan right now, because not only have we been eating good with the indie scene, we're really seeing Metroid games now. And I can almost guarantee that we see something big with Castlevania. Like, if they take it in the same route as where they're going with the Metal Gear Solid games, I'm expecting them to announce something big soon. And with that being said, this is why I think Metroidvania is the genre that refuses to die.